Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rami Shilbaya. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Quantum Dice. We're an Oxford University spin-out, and we have a very simple mission. We want to protect a connected future. Before we dive in a little bit more into what we are doing, let me give you a quick run-through of who is Quantum Dice. So as I mentioned, we're a university spin-out that came out of the physics department a few years ago, thanks to incredible support both from private sector venture capital investors as well as grant funding through Innovate UK. We've been able to build an incredible team both of scientists, engineers, and commercialization experts with decades of expertise taking products from the lab to the market. And taking products from the lab to the market, we did. So we already have commercial activities in a number of sectors, not just in the UK, but also in the US and in East Asia with clients such as BT and HSBC. So before we get into how and what our technology could be useful for the IoT sector, it's instructive to start with, first of all, seeing how incredibly convenient IoT has made our lives. So something as simple and as small as this phone now basically serves as my wallet. It serves as a computer. I use it to do my emails. I sometimes have used it to code. And it serves as a general repository for every single important document I have. I think I haven't traveled with a clear case containing files for a very long time now. This contains my plane tickets, it contains confirmations for the hotels, it contains everything. Basically, if this thing dies, I'm lost. Now, this is incredibly convenient, of course, because it's very small and it's very portable, but it doesn't stop there. As far as IoT goes, smartphones are actually quite bulky and quite expensive. If we think about the evolution of a smart card with a simple chip inside of a plastic card, you can transform it from just a simple ID to something containing your passport information, something containing your government records, something containing your medical records. And in fact, some governments around the world are already doing all of that, putting everything just on a simple chip inside of a simple card to make everything as frictionless as possible. But as with anything, convenience always comes at a cost. So IoT devices are fairly simple, and because of that, they can be vectors of attack. And when we think about them being a vector of attack, we have to understand that that doesn't necessarily mean that just what's on the device itself is what's compromised. Of course, the device now carrying all this information, it being compromised is a big deal, but the idea behind IoT is that it's connected. And once it's connected, it being compromised can compromise everything else that it is connected to. Multiple research has shown that you can use even simple IoT devices that barely cost anything as a vector of attack into a wider, much more complex, a much more expensive network. And for that reason, security of these devices is becoming incredibly important. Now, of course, I'm preaching to the choir here, so let's talk about security. Now, security, of course, has many layers. When we think about it, usually we think about the security systems that we deploy, whether that is firewall, whether that is some kind of antivirus system, some kind of threat detection system. On a much more deeper level, people sometimes think about encryption. How are we protecting and obfuscating the data that we are sending? How can we protect it from unwanted access? At Quantum Dice, we are thinking about something even lower level than that, and that is randomness. At the fundamental layer of every encryption protocol that exists, from the most simple encryption that is being used to protect your WhatsApp messages to the most complex encryption that's being used to protect state secrets. All of those rely fundamentally on the ability to create secure random encryption keys. And the security of those keys is intimately tied to how random they are. And in fact, recently, in 2022, which is no longer, sadly, too recent, Atis published a paper about the implication of randomness on the security of, in this case, they were looking at symmetric encryption, and they were looking at possible future quantum computer-based attacks on insufficiently secure and insufficiently random keys. But we don't have to go that far. And we don't actually have to just look at networks. So let's go back to the smart card example. So in 2013, Taiwan decided to do the very thing that I was talking about a minute ago and put a lot of different pieces and bits of information on just a simple smart card and hand it out to citizens. They were doing a pilot to see if they can efficiently digitize government. And as with many things it's done for the first time, a big, big problem happened. They realized, well, not them actually, some ethical hackers realized that the encryption keys that were being generated by these cards were insufficiently random. They could be broken into and therefore cause a serious security vulnerability. Based on this, about 10,000 cards were recalled and sent back to the original factory. Now, that was in China, think of that as you may, but in any case, whether that was deliberate or just accidental, this meant and showed that when you don't think about how you're doing your randomness, problems happen. And this isn't just limited to one incident. I know 10,000 cards doesn't sound like a big deal. How about this? So researchers at Keyfactor looked at all of the RSA keys that exist, and you can publicly find them on the internet, and tried to do some analysis to see how good those keys actually are, in the sense of how random they can be. Now, of course, statistical tests and statistical evaluation to see how random a key is always fraught with uncertainty, but it can give us a good idea of when something goes wrong, even if it can't guarantee to us that something has gone right. And what they saw was that a considerable percentage of those keys were vulnerable. And one of the reasons that they highlighted was the fact that IoT devices, being fairly low resources, could not sustain the entropy that was needed to generate and maintain good encryption keys. And now you might think that randomness, although it's so fundamental, it's a relatively simple thing to do. Right? We've been doing it for a very, very, very long time. Well, it's not that obvious. So let's take a step back and think about randomness. So if you look at the sequence of numbers, do you think you can predict what comes next? Looks fairly random, but if we zoom out, this is actually just an extract from the digits of the number pi. Now, not only can I predict what comes next, I can predict what comes next to 1,000,000 digits after that. And now it's important to note that this isn't some kind of just optical trick. Of course, a human eye isn't capable of detecting whether something is random or not just by looking at it. But if I take 1,000,000 digits from pi and put it into some of the standard tests that exist right now that you can go download off the internet, that have been developed by standard organizations, to see if something is random or not, it will tell you that 1,000,000 digits from pi is random, when of course we know it isn't. And fundamentally, the problem here is that it is, in a sense, mathematically impossible to be sure that something is random just by looking at the output of what it produces. You can get some level of certainty on a collection of samples, but you cannot really tell anything for certain, and you can definitely not tell anything at all about just a single sample. But when you're dealing with encryption keys, a single key can be quite important. And this is specifically the challenge that Quantum Dice is looking to address. So what we've developed is a patented technology that we call the Source Device Independent Self-Certification Protocol, or DISC for short. As you can see, physicists have not gotten better at naming things. Now, what DISC does is basically it leverages some really interesting properties about quantum systems that allow you to not just generate truly random output. And truly random here means even if the system is completely under the control of somebody else, they cannot predict the output that's going to come out of it. It doesn't just allow you to do this, but it allows you to do something additional that's quite powerful, which is that it allows you to continuously monitor the amount and the quality of the randomness that's being produced. And this is really the key advantage, because now you have a level of assurance on a sample-by-sample basis that you are getting exactly the amount of entropy that you need for the encryption key that's going to protect your system and every other system that is connected to it. So if we look at a comparison between what's currently being done with so-called classical random number generators versus the quantum dice solution, well, in terms of quality, you cannot beat it, because fundamentally you are leveraging certain interactions that we know for sure from a mathematical proof are producing randomness. And that continuous monitoring that we do that is linked intimately to a hardware measurement means that you can get something that no statistical test can give you. A level of assurance on each individual sample and each individual key that is created. That, of course, means that your reliability beats anything else that you can do. And then finally, one of the hidden benefits of using a quantum system, especially a quantum photonic system, is you can get a lot of randomness. We are capable of producing, even a very simple system, gigabits of randomness per second. Now, of course, we're not the only quantum random number generator game in town. There are a number of other companies out there that are touting their QRNG solutions. However, what we are is the only solution on the market right now that can combine this continuous monitoring, this continuous assurance, along with an incredibly high bitrate, as well as with a system that can be easily integrated. And let's talk about the elephant in the room. How is this integratable into an IoT system? Because when we usually think about quantum technologies, we think of things that look like this. Either something that looks like the amazingly cool superconducting quantum computer, but that needs an entire room filled with cooling systems to get it to run. Or, even when we talk about photonics, people usually imagine a gigantic table filled to the brim with small little mirrors to get things working. Well, for us, we're neither of those. Let me show you a picture of our latest system. This is it. Just this tiny little chip, 5 by 5 millimeter in a package. The clear package is just for the picture. Don't worry, the actual thing comes in a pretty protected package. This, on it, contains all of the necessary components to do our generation, to do our assurance, and to do our interfacing. And this comes in a 5 by 5 millimeter completely integratable system. And I know that I mentioned photonics, but you don't have to worry about interfacing with photonics. Basically, the interfaces to this chip are completely electronic. So you can treat this like you treat any other electronic component that you put on your system. Now, let's say that you can't even afford to put something of this size. Well, we've even thought about a way to address that. So what we have developed is what we call the quantum entropy as a service solution. Servers placed in different locations around the world, connected to the internet, that are directly feeding randomness into all of the device that need it. So this is inspired by an entropy distribution protocol that was originally developed by the NIST in the US, and which relies upon a different level of security to securely deliver entropy, as in randomness, to every endpoint that needs it. And that involves IoT endpoints that are too small, too low-powered, or too much out there in the field to be replaced and have a chip be placed in them. So this technology is ready now. This isn't some kind of quantum promise for the future. We are ready now. We've already deployed this system. We've already deployed both the hardware systems as well as the entropy as a service solution, and we're currently looking to deploy the chip. So why should you move to this now? Well, first of all, it's going to take some time. So if you start now, then you can be first. But more importantly, this isn't some future threat that we just need to think about now in anticipation of it happening 10, 20, or 30 years ago. Yes, quantum computers are going to produce some vulnerabilities in our random number generation, as the ATIS report showed, but that isn't the only threat. We already have some vulnerabilities now, as the Taiwan case has proved, and as many other cases have proved over the past decade. That key factor report isn't showing a good picture of how we are doing things now, forgetting about the future. So if you move now, then you can not only gain an advantage, but you can also think about some of the vulnerabilities that you are exposed to at the moment. If you're interested to learn a bit more, please come visit us at our booth. And thanks again for listening to me speak, and thanks for the IoTSF for organizing this. Thank you.